So this is going to be notes on absolute value equations. Okay, so absolute value equations. Now, the first thing with absolute value is that we understand what the definition of absolute value is. So absolute value is the positive distance that a number is from zero. So for example, if I was going to take the absolute value of 3 or the absolute value of a -3, I'm really trying to figure out how far are they from 0. So if I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, -3, and I want to figure out, okay, how far is that from 0? And how far is that from 0? So if I'm trying to figure out how far something is from 0, the distance from here to here is 3. The distance from here to here is also 3. So the absolute value of 3 is going to be 3. And the absolute value of a -3 is also going to be 3. So I'm always going to be getting a positive value back. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is actually solving equations. Okay, so I'm going to go through some steps for this. So when I'm solving an absolute value equation, I'm going to give us a couple of steps here. So step number 1, you want to isolate your absolute value. That means get your absolute value by itself. The next thing you want to do is you want to check the sign of the number on the other side of the equal. And when you're checking it, if you end up getting a negative, so if number is negative, your answer is going to be no solution. Don't leave it blank, write out either no solution or 0 with a slash through it, okay? Now, why is that so? The reason that is so is because an absolute value, because absolute value will always be a negative number. Sorry, be a negative number. Sorry, be a positive number. I'll put a positive result. So what happens if it is not negative? Okay, so this is where we have to do a little work. So if number is positive, then write two equations and solve. And so what we're going to do for that is you're going to take what is in absolute value, I'm going to abbreviate, and set equal to the number outside, and take absolute value I should say take what is in the absolute value and set equal to the negative of the number. Now I'm going to add on here, if the number is 0, you're only going to have one equation, because the opposite of 0, a negative of 0 is still 0. So if the number is 0, then write one equation and solve. Okay, so I'm going to run through a couple of examples. Okay, so those are the steps. So example 1. Make this a little smaller. If we have the absolute value of x is equal to 10, then first thing we're going to do is always check to make sure our absolute value is isolated, which it is. Then we're going to look at this number on the other side, and we're going to see if it's positive or negative. So since this is positive, we're going to write two equations. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what's inside the absolute value, which is x, set it equal to 10. Take what's inside the absolute value x, set it equal to the opposite of that, which is a negative 10. And in this case, those would be our two answers, because the absolute value of 10 is 10 and the absolute value of negative 10 is 10. Example 2. Let's say we take it up a step and we have the absolute value of x minus 9. No, sorry, x minus 5 is equal to 9. So again, we check to make sure our absolute value is isolated, and it is, it's by itself. I look at the number on the other side of the equal, and since this is a positive, we're going to write our two equations. So our two equations are going to be x minus 5 equals 9. Again, I just take what's inside the absolute value and set equal to 9. And then I take what's inside the absolute value, x minus 5, and set it equal to the opposite of 9, which is a negative 9. So then I'm going to solve. So when I solve, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So I add 5 here, add 5 here. I also can do the same over here, add 5, add 5. And then I'm going to end up with x is equal to 14. That's going to be one of my answers. And x is equal to negative 4. Now, I don't need to double check my math, but if I was to take 14 and put it into this equation right here, 14 minus 5 is 9, and the absolute value of 9 is 9. That checked out. -4. -4 minus 5 is a -9, and the absolute value of a -9 is a 9. Okay, so you see that's why we're getting two answers. Okay, next example. Let's say, for example, we have the absolute value of 2x plus 3 is equal to 15. So again, our absolute value is isolated. I want to look on the other side to see what sign that is. I see that this is a positive. So that means, again, I'm going to write two equations. So my first equation is going to be, and again, I'm just taking what's inside my absolute value. My first equation is going to be 2x, oops, forgot my x. Okay, 2x plus 3 is equal to 15. My second equation is going to be, again, the same 2x plus 3, but this time it's going to equal a -15. So when I work this out, I'm going to minus 3. I'm going to minus 3. I'm going to do the same over here. I am going to end up getting 2x is equal to 12. I'm going to divide by 2, and I get x is equal to 6. On the other side, I'm going to get a 2x is equal to -18. I'm going to divide by 2, and I get x is equal to -9. Both of those, if I put in, are going to make this a true statement. So next example. So for this next example, let's say that we have the absolute value of x minus 3 is equal to 0. So if I have a 0 over here, okay, if 0, then write one equation. The second equation would be you making 0 opposite, but the opposite of 0 is still 0. So I'm going to have one equation when it equals 0. It's going to be x minus 3 equals 0. I am going to add 3 to both sides. And I'm going to get x is equal to 3. And that is my answer. Next example, let's say we have the absolute value of x plus 10 is equal to a -20. So you don't want to skip that first step of checking to see what's on the other side. There is a negative here. When I take the absolute value of a 20, I get 20. When I take the absolute value of a -20, I get 20. I will never get a -20 when I take the absolute value. So if negative, remember, no solution. It's going to be an impossible problem to solve. So you can write out no solution, or you can give me the 0 with a slash through it. Okay, but don't leave it blank. Otherwise, I'm going to assume you just did not know what to do. Okay, next example, I'm going to add a page on. Next example. This one's going to be a little bit more complicated. So up to this point, all of our equations, my absolute value was isolated. So we didn't have to worry about that. In this example, I'm going to have it where it's not isolated. So let's say it's a -8 minus 2 times the absolute value of 5x minus 7 is equal to a -14. So let's say that's our problem. Now, the first thing you might notice is that it is a negative over here, but it's not isolated, okay? So it is negative, but the absolute value is not isolated. So we need to isolate first. Okay, so when I say isolate, what I mean is I want to get my absolute value. This absolute value, I'll do it in pink here. I want this absolute value all by itself. So that means I don't want this -2 here, which is multiplying with it. And I don't want this -8 here, which is adding, subtracting. So the very first thing I'm going to do is here, let me just rewrite the problem here so we see it without all the highlights. Very first thing I'm going to do is I need to undo this. That is the very first thing, something that's adding or subtracting to the absolute value. So I am going to add 8, add 8. And when I do, that's going to be gone. I'm left with -2 times the absolute value of 5x minus 7 is equal to -6. Okay, my absolute value still is not isolated. And yes, I do have a negative over here, but again, it is not isolated yet. Okay, so I got to still isolate it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to divide by a -2. Never distribute into your absolute value. Never. I don't care if it's positive or negative. Just do not distribute into your absolute value. Get your absolute value isolated. So I divide both sides by -2. I get a 5x. Let me write that a little nicer. I get a 5x inside my absolute value is equal to a +3. So now when I look at this, here it is isolated, okay? Let me write this a little bigger here. Absolute value is isolated. And equals a positive. So now that this is a positive, we're going to write our two equations, okay? So one of those equations is going to be 5x minus 7 is equal to 3. The other equation is going to be still 5x minus 7, but this time equal to -3. And we're going to work these out. So I am going to add 7. And I'll do the same over here. And I get 5x is equal to 10. On this side, I get 5x is equal to 4. I am going to divide by a 5, divide by a 5, do the same over here. And I'm going to end up getting a fraction on one of these. This one's going to be 2. That's nice. This one's going to be 4/5. That's okay. Leave it as 4/5. Those are our two answers. But again, you need to isolate your absolute value first. Now, the next one I'm going to write is one that we're going to see every so often where you have an x outside. So let me just draw a line. Okay, so for this is where we have an x outside of absolute value. And this is going to make it a little trickier. So let's say for this example, we have the absolute value of 2x plus 5 minus 4 is equal to 3x. So again, what I want you to notice is we have an x outside our absolute value, okay? So we have an x outside of our absolute value. So I'm still going to do what I normally would do. So first step is isolate absolute value. That's going to be my first step. So I am going to add 4 to both sides. When I do, I get the absolute value of 2x plus 5 is equal to 3x plus 4. Now, once I get it isolated, I look at this side and decide if this is positive or negative. So that's what we're trying to decide here. Is this positive or negative? Positive, question mark, negative, question mark. Well, if you have an x there, you don't know. We don't know. Don't know. So what that means is we're going to solve this. And at the end, we're going to check our answers here. They need to make that positive or 0. When I say make it, they need to make the 3x plus 4 either positive or 0, because you can always have it equal 0. Just cannot have it be a negative. I can't have the 3x plus 4 become negative. So I'm going to write my two equations. My first equation is going to be 2x plus 5 is equal to 3x plus 4. My second equation is going to be 2x plus 5, and I make my 3x plus 4 opposite, everything opposite. So my 3x is going to become a negative 3x. My plus 4 is going to become a minus 4. If either of those had been a negative, I would switch them to a positive. We make them opposite. So now I'm going to solve. So when I'm solving, I'm going to solve each of them here separate. I'm going to minus 2x here. When I do, I get 5 is equal to x plus 4. I am going to minus 4 from both sides. And when I minus 4, let me just make that look like a 4. When I minus 4 from both sides, I end up getting a 1. Now, I need to check this, okay? Need to check. Must check. Okay, so I don't know if that's my answer yet. I'm going to kind of wait a second. For the other one, I am going to actually add 3x. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to get 5x plus 5 is equal to negative 4. I'm going to minus 5 minus 5. I end up with 5x is equal to negative 9. I divide by 5, divide by 5. And when I do, I end up with x is equal to negative 9/5. Now, again, I must check. Okay, so don't automatically assume because something's positive or negative, it works. It really depends on what is right here, this 3x plus 4. And that's where I'm going to check. That is where I'm going to check. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to take this and I am going to check it here. And I'm going to check that here. That's what I'm going to do. So I don't need to check it into the original. You check it where your absolute value is isolated. So I'm just going to make a note. Check where absolute, I'm I'll say check equation where absolute value is isolated. And you don't need to plug it into the whole thing. We're going to plug it into just the 3x plus 4. That's what I'm checking. I don't care about the other sign. I can't. Is that positive? Is it negative? Or it could be 0. That's okay. So when I'm doing this, I am going to take x equal 1 and put it into 3x plus 4. So I'm going to get 3 times 1 plus 4, which is 7. So that is good. Okay, that is good. So this is going to be an answer. And you can get more than one answer. So I'm going to take x equal negative 9/5. I'm going to substitute that in. So I'm going to get a 3x plus 4 that I'm plugging it into. So I'm going to have 3 times negative 9/5 plus 4. And really, I only care about the sign of it. Let me just open up a calculator here. So I am going to go 3 times negative 9/5 plus 4. And I end up with a negative 7/5. All I care about is that it's negative. I end up with a negative 7/5. So not a solution. So the only one that's going to be our answer is this one here. This one here is not going to be an answer. Okay, it's not going to be an answer. And that's the end of these notes.